The alarm did not start loud. The IT began as a single low tone, almost polite, the kind of sound that made you look up from whatever you were doing and think. That is odd. Then it doubled. Then it became everything. Walls, floor, ceiling, all of it vibrating with a red pulse that turned the white corridors of the GUS Ardent into something that looked like the inside of a wound. Ren was in the middle of rest-stitching a torn supply bag when it started. The med bay was quiet before that. Just Run, the hum of the ventilation, and the faint smell of antiseptic that never quite left the room no matter how many times the filter cycled. Ren set down the bag and looked at the display panel on the wall. The words were already there, blinking in the universal emergency font that every ship in the Galactic Union used because it had been tested across 47 species and found to be readable even in a full panic containment breach. Section 7. Void Class Specimen. All crew to emergency shelter immediately. Run read it twice, not because the words were hard to understand, but because something did not match. Outside in the corridor, the sound began. Feet. Many feet, all moving fast in the same direction. AI Vinri crew member flew past the medbay door, her bioluminescent patches flickering orange, which meant terror in her species. Two Galthari engineers ran shoulder to shoulder, their forearms pumping hard, their heavy footfalls shaking the floor. Someone was shouting in a language Run did not speak, but the pitch was universal. The comm unit crackled. Drawl's voice came through, sharp and tight. All personnel, this is Officer Drawl. The specimen in Section 7 has broken free of its enclosure. Repeat, the Void Serpent is loose. Proceed to shelters on decks 4 and 5 immediately. Do not attempt to engage. Do not approach Section 7. Run clipped the comm unit to a belt loop and walked to the doorway. The corridor was nearly empty now. The last few crew members were disappearing around the far bend, the sound of their running fading fast. The red light pulsed. The alarm kept its steady beat. Rin stood there for a moment. The GUS Ardent was a research vessel, not a warship. It carried 12 crew members, a modest cargo of biological specimens, and one very special passenger that the Union Science Division had spent 4 years and an enormous amount of political capital acquiring. A Void Serpent, fully grown, approximately 11 meters from the tip of its forward sensory cluster to the end of its tail. The only living specimen ever taken from the dead zones of the outer spiral without killing everyone involved in the capture. Every briefing Ren had sat through before this mission had used the same word to describe the Void Serpent. Unpredictable. The xenobiologists said it with reverence. The security team said it with the flat voice people use when they mean dangerous and do not want to be dramatic about it. The Union officials said it in the careful tone of people who have already decided that certain losses are acceptable. Ren had read all the files. Every report. Every partial observation submitted by the handful of researchers who had survived proximity to the species long enough to write anything down. And standing in the corridor now, listening to the sounds coming from the direction of Section 7, Rin thought, that does not sound like something that wants to kill. The IT sounded like something that was in pain. There was a difference. Rin had grown up in a part of Earth where the distinction mattered. A hill range where the winters were hard and the wildlife did not care much about the boundaries humans drew around their small homes. Rin had learned early, not from books but from standing very still in the dark, that a creature making noise out of aggression and a creature making noise out of fear were doing two entirely different things, and that responding to both of them the same way was how people got hurt. The sounds from Section 7 were not the sounds of a hunt. They were the sounds of something surrounded by the wrong everything. Wrong light, wrong air pressure, wrong gravity calibration designed for the comfort of species that were not it. Something large and ancient and afraid, and expressing that fear the only way it knew how. Rin started walking towards Section 7, not running. Walking, measured steps. The way Rin moved when a patient was in the bed and panic in a room would only make things worse. The comm crackled again. Drawl. All crew report in to your assigned shelter. I'm doing a head count. Run, report in. Rin pressed the button on the comm unit. I'm in the corridor near Section 6. A pause. Corridor? Get to a shelter. Now. I'm heading to the containment bay first. The silence that followed was long enough that the alarm filled it completely. Hey! Drawl's voice had changed. Lower. The tone officers use when they're genuinely unsure whether to give an order or ask a question. What are you doing? Rin stopped at the sealed door to Section 7. The door was thick, reinforced composite, the kind used in high-risk biological transport. Through the small observation windows set into it, Rin could see the corridor beyond, and at the far end, the bent remains of the containment bay's inner gate. Something enormous moved in the shadows beyond it. Rin's hand rested on the manual override panel beside the door. I'm going to take a look, Rin said into the comm, then Rin opened the door. The corridor on the other side of the door was cold. That was the first thing. The Void Serpent's enclosure had been climate-controlled to approximate the dead zone environment. Low temperature, low light, with an atmospheric pressure slightly higher than standard. The breach had let that cold spill out, and it settled over Rin's skin immediately, the kind of cold that did not feel threatening so much as honest. Like stepping outside early in the morning. Rin let the door close behind and stood still. The corridor stretched ahead about 30 meters before opening into the containment bay itself. The inner gate was gone. Not unlocked, but physically removed, twisted off its housing and pushed to one side. The metal edges were bent outward. Whatever had done it had not panicked. It had simply applied pressure until the obstacle was no longer in the way. The far end, in the containment bay, something moved, not toward Rin, not in any particular direction. It moved the way a living thing moves when it does not know where to go, a slow, massive circling, body pressing against the walls, then pulling back, then pressing again. Like a test, like a question being asked of every surface in the room. Rin did not move yet, just watched. The Void Serpent was hard to look at directly, not because it was grotesque, but because it seemed to absorb the available light rather than reflect it. Its scales, if they were scales, shifted between deep black and something that was almost the absence of color entirely. Its body was immense. The briefings had said 11 meters, but seeing that length move in a confined space made the number feel small. It had no visible eyes in the forward cluster of its head, only a series of sensory plates arranged in a shallow arc, currently spread wide. Wide sensory plates, renew from the files, meant active scanning. High alert. The creature was not hunting. It was reading its environment rapidly and desperately, and finding nothing that made sense. Rin's comm buzzed. Drawl's voice came through very quietly, because Rin had turned the volume down before opening the first door. Hey, I have you on camera in the Section 6 corridor. You are not in the shelter. I am asking you one more time. Rin pressed the comm button slowly, trying not to make a sudden sound. I need you to look at the camera feed for the containment bay, Rin said, voice low and even. Tell me what you see. A pause. Rin could picture Drawl standing at the bridge console, jaw tight, 3 of his 4 hands probably gripping something. I see a Class Omega organism that has breach containment and is currently. Is it moving toward the exits? Silence. Is it trying to breach the hull? Rin asked. Is it tracking crew signatures? Is it doing anything that an animal does when it wants to find and kill something? The silence was longer this time, on a separate channel. The second voice broke in. Sova, the Ivenry researcher who had spent 3 years arranging the specimen's transport and was now, Rin assumed, sitting somewhere in a state of complicated misery. The human has a point, Sova said. Her voice was thin and rapid, the way Ivenry sounded when they were thinking faster than their mouths wanted to move. Drawl, I have been watching the behavioral readouts since the breach. The serpent has not moved toward any crew-dense area. It has not attempted to access ventilation. Its movement pattern is disoriented. That is not aggression behavior. It tore the gate off, Drawl said flatly, because the gate was between it and a larger space, Sova said. Void serpents in the dead zones live in open geography. Thousands of kilometers of open space. We put it in a box. Rin was listening to all of this while watching the creature through the observation window set into the inner corridor wall. The void serpent had stopped its circling. It was still now. The sensory plates had shifted their angle slightly, toward Rin's direction. Rin did not step back. Instead, Rin reached over to the intercom panel mounted beside the window. It was a basic system, used normally for researchers to communicate with each other across the containment barrier during observation sessions. It broadcast sound into the bay. Rin pressed the button and said nothing for a moment. Just let the speaker carry the sound of steady breathing into the room. The void serpent went very still. Its sensory plates moved again, slowly, like someone tilting their head to hear something better. Rin kept breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The way Rin had learned to breathe on cold hillsides at night, when something large was close, and sudden movement was the only real danger. "What is it doing?" Drawl said on the comm. His voice had gone quiet in a way that had nothing to do with volume control. Sova answered before Rin could. "It is listening," she said. The void serpent's body had dropped lower. Not coiled, not tense. Lower in the way that a creature lowers itself when it is no longer spending all its energy on readiness. The sensory plates were still spread, but slower now, less desperate in their movement. Rin pressed the intercom button again and spoke. Soft words, no particular meaning, just the sound of a calm voice in a room that had, until very recently, contained nothing but alarms. The creature did not move away. Rin's hand moved to the manual release for the inner corridor door on the comm. Drawl made a sound that was not quite a word. Rin turned the release. The door opened inward. Rin did not rush through it. One step over the threshold, then a pause. Let the air change around the body. Let the creature's sensory system register the new variable. Something warm, something small, something that was not making the sound the alarms had been making. The containment bay was large by ship standards. High ceilings, reinforced walls, the floor marked with measurement grids that now seemed faintly absurd given what was standing on them. The overhead lights had been damaged during the breach. 2 of the 4 panels were dark, and the remaining 2 cast a low, uneven light that left most of the far wall in shadow. The void serpent was in that shadowed. IT had pulled itself into the far corner, which told Rin something important. Corner behavior in large animals was not aggression. It was a margin. The creature was giving itself a wall at its back because everything else in the room was unknown. Rin understood that. Rin stepped fully into the bay and let the door close. And no weapon. The medkit was back in the bay. The only thing Rin had brought was a small handheld speaker unit, the kind used to project audio during medical procedures when patients could not wear earpieces. It was clipped to a belt loop next to the comm unit. Rin pressed play on a file that had been running in the background of Rin's thoughts since the first alarm. Low-frequency sound. Not music. Something closer to the ambient recordings taken from the dead zones during the capture mission. The natural electromagnetic resonance of that region, converted to audible range and played back at a frequency a void serpent sensory plates could theoretically detect. Sova had shared that file 3 weeks into the voyage during a late crew dinner, talking too fast about research possibilities while most of the table smiled politely and understood nothing. Rin had listened and asked questions. Sova had been visibly surprised by that. The sound came out of the speaker now, soft and low. The creature's head moved. Not toward Rin. Not away. It oriented in the way that sensory-driven creatures orient when something they recognize enters an unrecognizable space. Like a landmark appearing in fog. Rin moved 2 steps closer. Slow. Weight shifted forward carefully so each footstep was quiet on the grid-marked floor. On the comm, which was now set to listen only so no voices would come through. Rin could feel the crew watching. Every camera in Section 7 was live. Rin knew this without checking. Another step, the void serpent's body shifted. Not a lunge, a repositioning. It brought its forward section up, sensory plates fully spread now, and turned toward Rin completely. At this distance, Rin could see the plates in detail. They were not hard. They had a slight movement to them, independent tremors, reading micro-vibrations in the air. Rin stopped walking, stood still, kept the breathing even. The creature moved at IT was fast. Not the explosive speed of something attacking, but the fluid, sudden speed of something that has decided to close a distance before it changes its mind. 3 meters of forward motion, then a stop, the massive head dropping low, sensory plates nearly touching the floor. Rin did not step back. This was the moment. Rin had stood in moments like this before, on a different world, in cold, dark fields, with animals that could have ended the situation quickly and chose not to. The choosing not to was always the same. It came from a thing across from you reading what you were doing and deciding it was not a threat. You could not fake that reading. You could only actually be calm. Ren was calm, not performing it, not suppressing fear into a small box. Genuinely, functionally calm, the kind that comes from understanding what is happening well enough that panic cannot find a foothold. One hand came up slowly. Open, palm facing down, not up. Down was less challenging in almost every species Run had studied. The creature was close enough now that Ren could feel the air displacement from its sensory plates that IT struck. Not a full strike. Ren saw it happen, the forward motion, the speed, the sheer mass of it, and then the pull. The creature stopped its own momentum less than a half-meter from Ren's outstretched hand. A warning, clear and deliberate. This is what I can do. Now what will you do? Ren did not flinch, did not pull the hand back, did not step away, just held the same position, same breathing, same open palm. The seconds were very long. The void serpent's sensory plates trembled. Then, slowly, the great head dropped, not to the floor, not in submission. It lowered to the level of Ren's hand and stayed there, the sensory plates brushing the air just above Ren's skin without touching. Reading, finding apparently what it needed to find. The tension went out of the creature's body from front to back, a wave moving through all 11 meters of it. Like a breath finally let out. Ren's fingers moved forward the last small distance and made contact. Just the backs of two fingers, resting lightly against the side of the creature's forward section. IT did not pull away. Behind every camera on the ship, no one said a word. Ren stayed in the containment bay for 2 hours, not moving much, sitting eventually on the floor, back against the wall closest to the door, while the void serpent settled into the far half of the space. Not pressing into the corner anymore, not circling, just present, its body coiled loosely, sensory plates at a low resting angle. The electromagnetic resonance file still playing softly from the speaker unit on Ren's bell. IT, the 1 hour mark. Ren administered the sedative that IT had to be done close. The compound was a slow-acting agent that Sova had formulated specifically for the specimen's biology, meant to be delivered by direct contact with the sensory cluster rather than by dart or injection, because the serpent's exterior was effectively impenetrable to standard delivery methods. This was information buried in page 41 of Sova's research brief. Ren had read page 41. The creature did not resist. IT may have understood what was happening and allowed it. It may have simply been calm enough by that point that the contact felt safe. Either way, within 20 minutes, it was asleep, breathing slowly, plates folded flat, the tension completely gone from its enormous body. Ren sat with it until the breathing was stable, then walked out. The crew was waiting in the corridor outside Section 6. Not all of them. Some were still at stations, still watching feeds. But Drawl was there, and Sova, standing slightly behind him, clutching a data tablet to her chest with both primary arms and the 2 secondary ones as well. Drawl looked at Ren. He was a large being. Galthery officers usually were broad across the upper body, the 4 arms giving them a physical presence that tended to fill a corridor. He had led military operations before transferring to research escort duty. He had, by his own account in the crew briefing files, encountered 12 separate first contact situations and handled all of them without losing anyone. He looked like he was not entirely sure what he had just watched. "You should come to the med bay," he said finally. "Standard post-incident check." It was something to say. They both knew Ren did not need a medical check. They walked. Run, Drawl, Sova trailing behind. In the med bay, Drawl sat down on the edge of the examination table. Not to be examined, just to sit, and was quiet for a moment. "I want to understand what you did," he said. "I went in and stayed calm," Ren said. "That is not an explanation. It is the whole explanation." Drawl's secondary hands moved against each other. A gesture Ren had come to understand meant he was working something out. The Void Serpent has a 0 survivor record for direct encounters. That is not a statistic that comes from small sample sizes. 49 recorded direct encounters over 2 centuries. 49. It was scared, Rin said. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. Sova looked up from her tablet. She had been pulling data since before Run came out of the bay. The behavioral pattern matches documented fear responses in 6 other dead zone species, she said quietly. I should have flagged it earlier. I saw a breach, and I ran the same protocol everyone runs. Evacuate. Contain from a distance. I did not stop to read what the behavior was actually saying. Drawl looked at her, then back at Run. How did you know to stop and read it? Run thought about this for a moment. Not about the answer. The answer was simple. About how to say it in a way that would land. Where I grew up, Ren said, there were animals that could kill you without much effort. Big ones. The kind that had been on that land longer than any human structure nearby. You learned fast that the ones making noise were usually not the dangerous ones. The dangerous ones were quiet. Faint post. The loud ones were either warning you or asking you to leave. Both of those have a different answer than run. Drawl was still. The serpent was asking everyone to leave, Ren said. I just didn't leave. Sova made a soft sound. Not a word. Something between understanding and something she did not have a category for yet. Drawl sat on the examination table for another minute, not speaking. Then he stood, smoothed the front of his uniform in the way officers do when they are preparing to be official again, and looked at Ren with an expression that was not quite any single thing. I am filing the incident report tonight, he said. I do not know what to write in the section that asks me to explain the resolution method. Ren glanced at the data screen on the wall where the containment bay feed was still showing. The serpent asleep, its body finally still. Write that a crew member assessed the situation correctly and acted accordingly, Ren said. Drawl left without answering. Sova stayed. She looked at Ren for a long moment, then back at her tablet. I'm going to need to review every assumption in my research framework, she said. That sounds like a long project, Ren said. Yes, she said. It is. Sova transmitted the report and the footage 17 hours after the incident. She sent it to the Galactic Union's Department of Xenobiological Research, flagged urgent, with a second copy routed directly to the Union Council's Advisory Board for Class Omega species. She included the full behavioral analysis she had completed through the night, the biosensor readings from the containment bay, and 11 minutes of unedited camera footage. The response came in pieces, and none of the pieces were what she expected. The first message was from the research department's senior director, a Pelhari named Voss, whose species communicated formal disbelief through very precise word choices. The message said the footage had been reviewed and that the department was seeking confirmation that the recording was unaltered. Sova sent confirmation. She also sent the secondary camera angles and the biosensor logs, and her own notes written in real time during the event. Voss replied with a message that was technically a follow-up inquiry, but read between its careful lines like someone who had been sitting down when they received the original footage and had not fully stood up again. The second message came from the Union Council Advisory Board. It was longer, and its tone was different, not disbelief, but something that moved between caution and alarm. The board noted that the footage appeared to show a human crew member establishing non-aggressive contact with a Class Omega specimen. They requested a full crew debrief upon arrival at Union Station Veth. They used the word unprecedented 4 times in a message that was only 3 paragraphs long. Sova showed Rin the messages. Rin read them and handed the tablet back. They are frightened, Rin said. Of the serpent. Of the footage, Rin said. Of what it means. Sova turned this over. She was good at holding complex ideas and rotating them slowly until all the surfaces were visible. It was what made her a good researcher and occasionally a difficult conversationalist. They have spent a long time believing that a void serpent cannot be approached, she said. And now they have footage of a human approaching one. And the human is not remarkable, Rin said. Not self-deprecating, just factual. That is the part that bothers them. I did not use special equipment. I did not have unique biological properties. I read the situation and acted on it, which means, Sova said slowly, any human might have done the same. Some humans, Rin said. Not all, but the capacity was not unusual. Sova set the tablet down on the medbay counter. She was quiet for a while. I pulled the Union archives last night, she said. General records on human behavior across first contact situations. Did you know that in 14 separate recorded incidents involving large, dangerous fauna on newly cataloged worlds, humans were statistically more likely than any other Union species to approach rather than retreat? I did not know the number, Rin said, but I am not surprised by it. The Union filed those incidents under the category of risk-tolerant behavior, Sova said. They assessed it as a flaw. Impulsive. Dangerous to mission safety. She paused. But the approach outcomes were positive in 11 of the 14 cases. Rin said nothing. The Union looked at the same data and decided it was a liability, Sova said, because they could not explain it. They could not replicate it. The framework they had for understanding how a living thing should behave near an apex predator did not have a category for what humans were doing. On the other side of the ship, in Section 7, the Void Serpent slept. Drawl came into the med bay that evening with a different kind of look. He had spent the day on the comm with Union officials, fielding questions he could not fully answer and giving assurances about crew safety that he had delivered in the precise, controlled tone of someone who had himself not fully settled. The Union wants to know, he said to Run, if the contact was repeatable. You mean, can I do it again? They mean, can any human do it again? Drawl said. Their actual concern, as far as I can interpret it, is that they now have a human crew member who can manage a Void Serpent, and they do not have a classification for that. Ren looked at him. They have never had to have one before, Ren said. Drawl stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked, for the first time since Ren had known him, like a person whose mental map of the world had been redrawn while he was sleeping, and he was still working out which roads had moved. No, he said, they have not. He left. Rin sat in the quiet med bay, in the ship's evening cycle, while the stars outside the small viewport held their usual positions and the Void Serpent breathed slowly in its rebuilt enclosure, and the galaxy, far away and enormous, began the slow process of updating itself. Union Station Veth was large enough to have its own weather systems in the agricultural rings, which Ren had always found disproportionate for a station that described itself as a transit hub. The GUS Arden docked at Secondary Bay 14, which was the bay they used for sensitive biological cargo. The docking corridor was sealed. There were officials waiting. Ren watched them through the porthole in the docking hold. 12 figures in Union administrative uniforms, 3 in the gray of xenobiological security, and 2 that Ren did not immediately recognize until Sova appeared at Ren's shoulder and said quietly, "Council observers," in the tone of someone identifying a weather pattern that is probably going to complicate things. The debriefing took 4 hours. Ren sat in a white room and answered questions from people who had clearly watched the footage many times and still could not quite settle into any of the questions they were trying to ask. They wanted to know about training, which Ren did not have. They wanted to know about biological differences, which Ren could not offer. Human baseline, nothing exceptional on paper. They wanted to know about preparation, about the specific plan, about the protocols followed. Ren told them there was no protocol, that the protocol had been to leave, and Ren had assessed the situation and made a different decision. The council observer on the left, a tall palleth with gray-blue crest markings that indicated senior rank, said, "And if you had been wrong?" Ren looked at him. "Then I would have been wrong," Ren said. "But I was not wrong." This did not satisfy them. Ren had not expected it to. The problem, which Sova laid out for Ren afterward in the docking bay corridor with the precise clarity she brought to problems she found genuinely interesting, was as follows. The Union needed to transfer the Void Serpent to a high-security research facility. That was the original mission. That was what all the paperwork was for. But the Void Serpent would not permit it. They had tried, while Ron was in the debriefing room. A full xenobiological team in appropriate containment suits, with proper equipment, following every protocol the Union had for working with Class Omega specimens. The Serpent had destroyed the equipment, severely damaged the portable enclosure unit, and retreated to the furthest corner of its bay, where it was currently producing a subsonic vibration that was making 2 of the security team members feel that IT was not behaving this way when Ren was present. Sova had confirmed this in real time, watching the biosensor feeds from outside. When Rin had passed through the corridor near Section 7 on the way back from the debrief, the vibration had stopped. The sensory plates had moved to their resting angle. The creature had, in Sova's words, recognized a known variable and responded accordingly. The council observer, when informed of this, had taken a long time to respond. The practical outcome, negotiated over the following day in meetings that Drahl attended and reported back from with the expression of someone surviving a natural disaster with professionalism, was this: the transfer was postponed. A new research directive was proposed by Sova and signed off on under the condition that it was framed as a temporary arrangement. Rin was formally assigned as the specimen's primary handler, a role that the Union had to create from scratch because it had never existed before. Drahl delivered the news himself. "You are now," he said, standing in the med bay with the assignment papers on a Union-stamped data slip, "the galaxy's first void serpent handler." Rin took the data slip. "Read it. Is there a pay grade for this?" Drahl looked at him for a long moment. "I will ask," he said. The enclosure was redesigned over the next 3 days. Larger, lower light, atmospheric calibration shifted toward dead zone conditions. The electromagnetic resonance file was integrated into the bay's ambient audio system. Rin spent 6 hours a day in the enclosure, sitting, moving slowly through routine tasks, occasionally talking. Not because the serpent understood the words, but because the sound of a calm voice in a calm rhythm was itself a kind of information. On the 4th day, Rin was sitting in the enclosure reading on a handheld unit when the serpent moved across the bay and settled its great head approximately 1 meter from Rin's position. Not touching, just close. Rin did not look up immediately. Finished the paragraph, then glanced over. The sensory plates were at their lowest resting angle. The creature's breathing was slow. 11 meters of it, coiled in a loose arrangement that took up most of the available floor, completely still. Outside the bay's viewport, Union Station Veth glittered, and at a distance that was technically docking range, but practically not quite close enough to be called that. 3 Union observer vessels held their position, watching the GUS Ardent, watching the section of it where human and the most feared life form in the catalog galaxy were sitting together in a quiet room, not understanding it, not needing to understand it. "Run, turn the page," the serpent breathed. The ships kept their distance, and